What rights does a river have? What rights does the land have? Do they have any? Is it all just about us? When Europeans came here, they began to plow the prairie, cut the forests, drain the wetlands, straighten the rivers, and we've gone too far. We've passed the limits. And so now we have a situation where we're losing a lot of topsoil every year. Our water is polluted. We're part of an incredible watershed, the fourth largest watershed in the world, the Mississippi River Watershed. And that watershed culminates at the Gulf of Mexico. And what we're sending downstream shows up there in great quantity, in a concentrated quantity. It's a dilemma. I mean, we can't keep doing what we're doing. Much of today's environmentalism is rooted in fear. A fear that if humans don't do more, really bad things will happen. Be Wild, ReWild is rooted in deep ecology and trust, respecting all life, trusting natural systems, trusting natural processes, trusting wildness. We believe humans must do less consuming, and less domesticating. And so I would say that Be Wild, ReWild offers people an opportunity to rewild themselves, to be more wild. By that I mean self-reliant, spontaneous, self-willed, self-regulating, local, authentic, and free. So we would start with ourselves. And then, as we look around at ourselves, we see the need to rewild, to give otherness the opportunity to be wild.
Rewilding is wilderness recovery. It's places that are not designated now, nor could they be designated as wilderness. Other designations wouldn't apply. So in order for them to maybe sometime in the future fit those designations, you have to rewild. The landscape represents now a real separation that humans feel with nature. And of course, nature doesn't work like that, and nature fights back. And sometimes we have floods and we have things to remind us that nature will always win. It will move that river back to where it wants to be, no matter what. And we have to constantly either fight or we join nature. And in this extraordinarily altered landscape, a lot of people could look at it, and I did in the beginning, as what are we even going to do here? This has been so radically altered from its original state. And the answer actually puts a lot of hope in my heart, is just that we allow wildlife to come back. And I believe that there's a big movement, not just here, but all over the world. And it's not just in people you would typically expect it to come from, it's coming from farmers. It's coming from people on the land who we've traditionally seen as being at odds. Well, you guys are doing this on the land, it's not good for wildlife or biodiversity. You don't seem to feel like biodiversity is important. We are finding that that's something of interest to different people in different ways, but there is interest here, and I think that's enough to start with.
mission is to promote coexistence between people and wildlife through education, science, and advocacy. And we advocate on behalf of the most maligned, misunderstood, and persecuted wild carnivores in North America. So that includes coyotes, wolves, bobcats, bears, mountain lions, pretty much all the species that have little if no protections by our state and federal wildlife agencies, and can often be killed in 24/7 with unimaginable, indiscriminate methods. When I started Project Coyote, I made sure that coexistence was central to who we are. And when I look at the term coexistence and what it means and how many organizations and even agencies today are using that term. I mean, we have state wildlife agencies now that are hiring coexistence staff people who, are working in both urban and rural areas to promote coexistence. So that to me gives me great hope. I mean, to think that more and more people understand that it's not just humans living on this planet, that we share these landscapes with wild beings, and we need each other. We need, for example, wild apex predators for healthy, intact, fully functioning ecosystems. So that recognition, that increasing recognition, is very inspirational to me, and especially when we get to work with the young people who see that, get it, are talking to their parents, educating their teachers about it. They are our spokespeople. That, to me, is what gives me a tremendous amount of hope. So what I think most excites me when I look at the collaboration between Project Coyote, the Rewilding Institute, Be Wild, ReWild, Half Earth, is that we're bringing in these different movements that have this overarching similar goal, and that is really about rewilding our wildlands through a whole variety of mechanisms, particularly focused on the Mississippi Watershed, but also looking at these cultural values, these things that have shaped how we interface with wildlife, with wildlands, with now very managed lands. And how do we bring back the wild, the beautiful, the connected?
If people are approaching this rewilding from a shallow ecology point of view, their benefit would be their own sustainability. They would be saving nature, wild nature, for their own sake. Clean water, clean air, ongoing production of food. In deep ecology, all life has intrinsic value. So from a deep ecology perspective, the benefit would be in knowing that you were allowing and respecting all life.
Rewilding is going to be one of the biggest contributors to combating climate change and biodiversity loss. Also connectivity to get connected from one place to another. Species that can't cross roads, they won't expose themselves, some to even paths. So you gotta have connectivity, and here you start with water. And we're even looking at flyways and having the birds tell us, where the hot spots are. So that's what we do. We try to figure out how nature wants to rewild, and we go to the core pieces, waterways, any large places that already exist, like state parks and private lands that are maybe in conservation easements, and start the rewilding process by basically doing nothing. Leaving things alone is the first step in rewilding. We have an area that is 32 states. It's the complete Mississippi watershed, and it's massive. And it's complicated, it's complex. It doesn't have a big mountain chain sitting right in the middle of it. That would naturally have maybe a national park in it, or a forest or whatever, and we would go from there. Here it's complex, it's a lot of farming. People know why they love the Rocky Mountains. They know why they love the Adirondacks. Here, it seems like the whole country has just decided that this is where we get our food, and in order to do that, we have to take away a lot of forest and other things. And then we're just gonna have to be cool with that because the Rockies exist, because the Adirondacks exist, because the Smokies exist. And we have to change our game from what we've done over the last few decades.
And the technology's already here. I mean, we've got a lot of farmers that are using no-till, and then more and more are starting to use cover crops. And so if we put permanent, unmanaged perennials on the steep slopes and frequently flooding river bottoms, those would be the cores in corridors that we need for increasing biodiversity. And then if we built wildlife crossings over and under transportation routes to allow the movement of those critters. And at the opposite extreme, the most agriculturally productive and nearly level soils can grow annual row crops like corn and soybeans, produced in ways that improve soil and water quality. And what we have left is less sloping hillsides that could be in permanent perennials that are harvested or managed in some way. For example, if people wanted to have a managed restored prairie where they were regularly burning, maybe someone would want to pasture that area. Maybe another person would make hay off from it. An orchard would be another example of managed perennials. And you took care of it like we never have before, to a point where you not only stopped losing topsoil, but you were actually building it. So it's everybody's problem, and everybody's got to be part of the solution. And almost on a daily basis, I hear people bashing farmers, bashing agriculture for producing corn and soybeans and livestock. And yet those same people are going to the store and buying meat, and they're buying other products that are made out of corn and soybeans, and they're burning ethanol in their cars. They're using motor fuels. What the consumer buys and the prices they're willing to pay determine what the farmer will produce and the methods that are used in that process. So we can create a low input sustainable agriculture, but we will do that only by creating at the same time a low input sustainable urban culture.
When people start to loosen up on the way that we're managing and using land now and rewilding some of it, floodplains, grades above 9%, if we can at least get that going, we give animals a better chance to move from place to place, which is the very first thing. In this stage, where we are with farming and infrastructure and things, looking at how things can be wilder and how it can actually make it better, that it's not a sacrifice to the landowner, it's actually a bonus. We can start turning people around really quick, the way they think about land and the way they think about biodiversity and how they can help with that and make a living. And it really is a rosy scenario, but that's the way I like to think about it, because it's actually how it can happen. There's no doubt in my mind. Everybody who is on the other side of that, who really looks at the land in that way as rebalancing and rewilding it, I've not met a sad one. I've not met one that says that they're unsuccessful, that they're unhappy that they chose to do what they did, even though it was hard, even though it was learning a completely new system of farming, and in some ways it was difficult. And I just think, wow, what if that really took off big, in a really big way, and you saw a place like Iowa just greening up. There's still agriculture here and still meeting the demands of national food and needs and everything else, but doing it in a way that is just a lot more balanced. And so I like to get people to think about embracing that. Just embrace it. It's coming, and you could be one of the first.
So to me, that element of rewilding and really looking at how do we restore an ecosystem to its full capacity so it's serving everyone and all beings, not just human beings, that to me is really, really exciting. And that's where I think we come together and have so much potential.
Bringing that balance back, rebalancing, rewilding, is basically making everybody's lives easier. It actually would be easier to farm, and the yields could be higher with less land. And by less land, meaning some of that land going back to just being wild. So when you rebalance an area, you have a wonderful balance between all the different land uses in an area that includes agriculture, and it can include higher yielding, more productive land on less area. And people are proving that around the country. It's just not common knowledge yet. And there's not an animosity toward the land that a lot of outside conservationists who are not from the Midwest would assume there is, because it's not true. A lot of people here really want to do something great and positive, and we're finding that to be a really neat and much welcome surprise because we need it.
Our wild neighbors are such a gift. Not only do they add to ecosystem services and do things like free rodent control if it's a coyote, fox, or bobcat, but it's a real gift to get to see a wild animal and to recognize that we do share this planet with other wild beings. And if we can just take a moment to enjoy that, savor it, recognize what a gift it is, what a beautiful planet this could be.